Hello everyone, welcome, and this is 5 and 25. My name is Lauren Flores. Today we're going to talk about 5 different terms that have been current in the news, so I'll list those off for you today. We're going to be talking about NFT, cryptocurrency, herd immunity variant, and vaccine passport. And I did want to let you know that I will be available on chat this evening. If you have any questions about the terms that we're talking about, you're welcome to ask the questions as they come to you during the discussion, or if you'd like, you can wait till after our session is over. So again, this will be about 25 to 30 minutes, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you about our 5 terms in the news. So let's go ahead and get started. So our first word is NFT. That stands for non-fungible token. And these have been in the news a bit lately, mostly talking about artworks. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that means, actually. And by the way, I'm at Google News, so if you use the lateral reading technique, this is one of our favorite tools for getting background information. But if we look at Google and we search for the definition of non-fungible token, you'll see that there's several. There's a Wikipedia entry. They do talk about a non-fungible token, or NFT, being a unit of data on a digital ledger called a blockchain. So NFT represents a unique digital item, and so they're not interchangeable. So they can be things like art, audio, video, other items in video games, and other types of art. And so you'll see that there's also an article by BBC News, so we can take a look at that really quickly. And they do talk about a digital-only artwork that was sold for about $69 million. And it's not a physical object, it's a unique digital token. And so that's the NFT that they're talking about. And it's interesting because the BBC goes to the economic definition. And so they do talk about the definition of NFT, or a fungible asset, in economics. So that's something with units that can be readily interchanged. So that's like money. You can exchange money for items and things. And if you go to Merriam-Webster and type in that particular word, so if you go to fungible, Merriam-Webster, it does talk about this particular aspect of the word that we are discussing today, and how it relates to money or commodities, and how it also relates to that idea of being interchangeable. And so if we go back to our discussion about NFT, it's something that's non-fungible, so this is actually a type of unique digital asset. And if we go back, there's some images that I can show you. And again, if you do look at the Wikipedia article, you'll see some examples. And so these 2 images are 2 examples of artworks that are NFTs, so they're unique. And so it's a really interesting concept, and it does lead into our next term, which talks about cryptocurrencies. So cryptocurrency is a type of currency that doesn't exist, at least in a non-digital form. And this image that I'm showing you right now is just a composite image that I got from Wikimedia Commons that shows some of the main cryptocurrencies out there and their symbols. And so if we look at Merriam-Webster's definition of cryptocurrency, they do talk about how cryptocurrency is a type of currency that only exists digitally. There's no central issuing or regulating authority, so it uses a decentralized system to record transactions, and it does also rely on cryptography, to prevent counterfeiting and fraudulent transactions. And so it's an interesting discussion because it is a new type of currency. It's something that's online, and it's outside of what I would call traditional economic and monetary systems. So it's not something that's issued by a government. And of course, if we go to Google News and we type in a search for cryptocurrency, you'll see that there's a lot of discussion about this particular topic. And so they do talk about one particular cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. And so we're going to look at that really quickly. This is what the symbol looks like. And so if we go back to our browser and check that out, there's a lot of discussion about this particular currency, how it's growing, how some people are saying that Bitcoin is going to be as big as gold. So there's a lot of really interesting discussion about this particular topic. And if we go to cryptocurrency and just do like a Google search, you'll see that, of course, there are sites where you can buy items, but it does talk about this particular concept and whether cryptocurrency is a good investment. And so it's definitely very interesting. I would recommend doing more research if it's something that interests you. I'm going to the library's website right now, and I'm actually going to jump into one of our databases. It's actually Credo Reference, which is a database that we often visit on the stream because it has a lot of good information about this particular topic. And again, Credo Reference is a really good resource because you can get a lot of background information. So I would consider it an alternative to Wikipedia if you want something that is actually sourced from published resources. But you'll see that there's several different dictionary entries for cryptocurrency. There's also some other items as well because Credo does also include journal articles and magazine articles. So you'll see that there's some discussion about that, and also there's just general issues around this particular topic. And so I'd like to move on. And again, just to remind you, if you have any questions, then you're welcome to ask them on chat. I did want to show you just one other thing. And so there's several different kinds of cryptocurrency, and you may be familiar with a meme that featured a really cute dog. And so there's actually a cryptocurrency that's named after that particular meme. So I figured I would show you this before we move on to our next term, which is herd immunity. And in terms of our next term, herd immunity is related to topics that go with the pandemic. So it does talk about diseases, and also it talks a little bit about, or at least refers to a little bit, vaccines as well. So herd immunity is a concept, and by the way, we are at the Merriam-Webster Web Dictionary and looking at their definition, but the way that they define it is that it is a type of situation where many people have either been vaccinated or they've had a particular disease so that they're pretty much immune. And so the way that this works would be you have a bit of a lesser risk of getting infected because so many other people around you are already immune or at least have been exposed. And so it's interesting because I'm going to go to our Credo reference search just to look at that, and you'll see that the very first link is talking about coronavirus, and it is from an independent source of analysis. It's called The Conversation. And so if you do look for words or topics that maybe have a bit of, I would say, controversy or at least public discussion, you'll find a lot of sources like that as well. in Credo. I did think it was interesting though, because there is a definition. It's from Merriam-Webster, but it's actually from Merriam-Webster's medical dictionary. So we can take a look at that particular entry. And it's interesting because it's a little bit shorter than the one that we were looking at earlier that's on the web version of Merriam-Webster. But it does talk about a reduction in the probability of infection that's held to apply to susceptible members of a population in which a significant proportion of other individuals are immune. So in other words, the chance of coming into contact with an infected person is lessened. And so it's interesting to go to, of course, Google News, and we can switch over to Google News and just see some of the discussions that are occurring about this particular topic. And you'll see that there's a lot of different news reports that talk about this particular concept because, again, we do have vaccines available now for COVID-19, and there's a big push for people to be vaccinated. And there's also an issue where there's several different variants of COVID that are starting to appear from other countries that are either more easily spread or maybe mutated in some form. And so, again, there has been a real discussion in public discourse about herd immunity and what that means and at what point do we consider that we have herd immunity. And so, again, if you have any questions about this particular term, we can definitely circle back and talk about it. But what I'd like to do is actually go on to our next term, which is variant, and that is also related to this COVID-19 pandemic terminology that we're seeing a lot in the news. So our next word is variant, and we will see that if we look at the definition in Merriam-Webster, and this is the web dictionary again, it is an adjective, and if we examine the description or the definition of this word, it really just means variety, deviation, disagreement. It can also mean varying, usually slightly from the standard form. So this is something that's not necessarily, I would say, completely related to the pandemic or COVID, but it is a term that you will see when they describe different forms of the virus. You'll see that variant is also a noun, and so it talks about one or two more persons or things exhibiting usually slight differences. So it could be a variation from the norm. It could be different spellings. It could also be two or more words that are similar or have more or less the same meaning. And you'll see at the bottom where when they give examples of how this word is used in sentences, it does talk about variant strains of a disease. And so it has it both in the adjective form and the noun form. And it's interesting too because Merriam-Webster will often show you links of recent examples on the web, and you'll see links here. So if you want to, you can click on any one of these web pages. So this first one is from the Boston Globe. So let me close that window. But it does talk about COVID-19 variants. Of course, if we go back to Credo reference, and we type in the word variant, we're going to get a lot of different results. You'll see that some of it's going to be pretty scientific. If you look on the part of the page that talks about more library resources, it does mention COVID-19 because, again, Credo reference does have information from different library databases, and so you'll see newspaper, magazine, and journal articles listed, and sometimes there'll be different subject areas. So There's some sections that talk about science and some that refer to health and medicine. And of course, if we go to Google News and we do a search on the word variant, you'll see the latest news that talk about the, in this case, variant versions of the virus. And so this word is really interesting. Again, it's one of those words where I would say that it's not always used when we're talking about COVID or just diseases in general, but it does seem to be one of those words that is becoming more common just because of the news and people reporting on the news and current events that are happening now. And so our last word that we're going to talk about this evening is vaccine passport. So we're going to stop in and take a look at that particular term. So our next term is a vaccination passport or vaccine passport. This is a really interesting topic and an interesting word. When you do searches, you may not necessarily find this particular term in a dictionary, but if you do a quick Google search, you'll see that it is definitely in the news. In fact, today is April 6th, and it looks like in Texas, our governor, Greg Abbott, banned government-mandated vaccine passports. And so it's definitely a topic that is being debated and discussed in government and in the press. And so we're going to start by talking about what a passport is. And so let me go ahead and jump into Merriam-Webster, and you'll see I typed in vaccine passport and nothing popped up yet. So I'm going to actually go just straight to passport so we can talk about that particular concept. And so passport is a noun, and so the definition of it is it's a type of formal document usually issued by a country to a citizen. And so it is a document that identifies you as a citizen of a particular country, and you use that document to travel. Normally, you would have to have that particular document to be able to cross into other countries. And so it is definitely a very important piece of documentation. And so you'll see that there's some other meanings to this particular term. So the secondary meaning that's shown is permission or authorization to go somewhere, or something that secures admission, acceptance, or attainment. And so when you take this understanding of the word passport and link it to vaccination passport, it gives us more of a description about what this particular set of terms, or I mean it's literally two words that's referring to a thing, so what it means. And actually I was going to show really quickly a picture of a United States passport if you've never seen one before. And I'm going to jump back and we'll go to a different web page. And so if we go to our Google search, it does start with the latest news. And of course, since we are in Texas, it does talk about our government and our governor's decree, or I'm not sure if it was like an executive order, but it looks like it is something that he has mandated for our state. And so when you look at the descriptions in the search, you'll see that there is one link that is going to what looks like a particular document. It appears to be a type of report, though it looks like it's from the New England Journal of Medicine. So this is a peer-reviewed scholarly medical journal, and so it does talk about what a vaccine passport certification is, and it talks about the ethical considerations. And so basically when you look at the description, it talks about basically a certification that shows that you've been vaccinated, so that way you can travel. One of the big ways that the COVID-19 pandemic has really affected things is it has really interfered with people's traveling because it's so contagious. And so this article is really interesting because it does talk about the concept of vaccine passport and the rationale behind it. And then it also addresses the different policies. So basically how governments would approach it or enact it and things like that. If we go back and if we switch over to our Google News search, of course, this is a little bit different, and you'll see that it does have several different links to news, and so some of them will be national news sources. So like one of these is to CNN, so it talks about vaccination passports and how that affects just the wider United States. And of course there's some articles that talk about Texas that discuss the local impact for us. But I did want to jump into Credo reference. I'm not really sure that they have anything yet for vaccine passport. We'll do a quick search and see. But again, there may be some articles that are going to refer to it. So you'll see that there's a couple of links that refer to some databases. So like the science database or the biography database. And we can go in and look at that. The other interesting thing too about this particular search is it's not necessarily exactly the same, but it is related to this concept. And so you'll see that there's a discussion about travel health, and that's from the Encyclopedia of Nursing and Allied Health. So it does give you some background information at least on maybe some of the rationale of why people would be advocating for a vaccine passport. But I did want to show a couple of images. There was an article that I had seen that talked about in previous times vaccination scars were considered to be a type of passport. And so I'm just going to quickly show that really fast so you can see what I'm talking about. And actually that's the wrong image, so let me get the image to pop up. So hopefully you can see that. This is a picture of a woman's arm, and this is an old picture. It was taken in the 70s, so this is not something that happens regularly nowadays, but back in the middle and late part of the last century, when people would be vaccinated, they would have a scar. And so that was a visible, I would say, token that people had certain vaccinations. And so it's interesting to go back to this particular concept when we talk about vaccination passports. And let me see if I can find that article really quickly just to kind of show you where it is. We're going to go to Google really fast. Let's see. Vaccination passport and scar. Yeah, so it's actually an article from Time magazine. It's an opinion piece, so if you're interested in reading it, this is the site, or you can use that combination of search terms that I use to get to that page. But it is a really interesting topic, and I think that it's something that we'll probably be discussing for quite some time in the news. And so it will be interesting to see how this particular term evolves, if it turns into something else or if the meanings change. But I'd like to go ahead and pause here because we are at the end of our time, and I did want to jump in and check with people to see if y'all had any questions. If not, thank you so much for attending. Again, if you'd like to ask questions, I will be available this evening on chat, so I won't be actually talking with you through the stream, but I will be on the chat that's accompanying the stream. And I did also want to mention as well that if you have any questions, you are welcome to contact the library. So you can go to mysapl.org, and there's a place where you can ask us questions online. And of course, you're welcome to browse our library resources. So again, I wanted to thank you for watching this stream, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. Good night, everybody.